Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our next speaker, Fredrik Carleson, presenting the topic, why you should focus on collaboration rather than roles.
Hi, welcome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Nice to be here. So this would be a talk about, more about collaboration than which role that you actually have. So imagine, you have a new fantastic job. You're about to become a manager at a brand new section. You have a few teams in place already. You have lots of money, so you can actually hire more people. You have no legacy code, so you can actually start from scratch. You're working with Scrum, you're scaling up with Safe. Everything is just perfect. It's like in the Lego movie. Everything is awesome, and you're really happy and enjoying going to work every day. And then suddenly, one day, the team, they walk up to you and they say, Fredrik, we're very confused. We don't understand our roles. And suddenly you realize that, my instruction manual, it's not really complete. It's not just like building a Lego thing that you can have it piece by piece and just turn the paper. There are still some things missing. So how do you continue from this? How do you make sure that every team member not only understands what they're supposed to do, but also ready to learn and adapt? So then everybody turned to me, looking at me as a leader and saying, hey, Fredrik, you need to help us now. What should we do? You need to clear up our job descriptions and roles. And this is usually, this is not a fictive scenario. This is usually what happens at many works. When you have a restructuring or you're having some new teams, etc., this is usually one of the first things that happens. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But perhaps before we move on, let's talk a little bit about me. So you might be wondering who I am. I have been in the software industry for the last 25 years or so, a little bit more. I've been a manager or a leader for more than a decade. But in my heart, I feel like a dungeon master. And a programmer. I like to code still, and I still do it. And I belong to the Commodore 64 generation. Anyone here remember Commodore 64? Yeah, not so many alive anymore. Anyway, that's where I learned to program, and that's where my interest for computers was born. I used to do a lot of role-playing because I belong to that generation, and that actually woke my interest for agility. Because believe it or not, being a dungeon master or a game master is very similar to being a scrum master or a coach for a software team. It's more or less the same skills. I've been a project manager as well. I've been business analyst. I've had many roles. I had the opportunity to work with lots of different frameworks and methods. Have had successful waterfall projects. I've been working with Restaurant Unified Process. I worked with Prince 2 and Agile frameworks, of course, and I've been lucky enough to be able to scale up with both Safe and less as well. And I worked for the United Nations, I worked for a private company, I worked in a startup company, and the governmental sector. So I've been lucky to try a few different things and get some different perspectives as well. Now, in my spare time, what I like to do is to write some article. I think it's a great way for me to collect my thoughts and try to understand what I'm talking about. I have a very messy brain. And then I do some presentations like this one. So, back to the story. So, the teams, they came to me and said, all right, we do not understand Scrum, we do not understand Safe, and what are our roles? And a little bit, like a Scrum nerd, I was thinking to myself, but we don't have any roles in Scrum anymore. Not since the Scrum Guide 2020, at least. Because in the Scrum Guide 2020, they talk about, accountability and responsibility instead. And that's very confusing, at least if you're Swede. Because if you translate accountability and responsibility, it becomes the same word. It means exactly the same thing as Swedish. I don't know if you have ever tried, to have a RACI, responsible, accountable, consulted, informed chart. That's very confusing in Swedish. It just doesn't work. But even in English, this is kind of hard to understand. It's like socks mixing in a dryer. You never get the right side of it. So I've been given this some thought, and the best example I could come up with, and this is of course a completely fictive story, was imagine I buy a car. It's a good car. It's a great car. I'm very happy about it. And then my son asks, "Can I please borrow it?" And I said, "Sure, you can borrow it, but be careful." And then he turns the car into modern art against a lamppost, the bastard. And then the thing is, who will be paying for this? That's me, because I own the car. I'm accountable for the car, even though my son was responsible for driving it. So you can think of accountability more as ownership, and responsibility is more about the one doing the actions as such. And in the word of Scrum, accountability, is then owning the car, and responsibility is driving it. And Scrum Masters, product owners, team members, they have different accountabilities and responsibilities. For example, the Scrum Master is accountable for creating an efficient team, but it's entire team's responsibility to become efficient. Now, let's then go back again to the story. So the teams were asking me to clarify their roles. Should I then, just respond by saying, no, we don't have roles, I know you were hired as a UX expert, but you're actually a developer, or no, we don't even have roles because you have an accountability. Now, of course, that would not be very fruitful to go into some religious Scrum discussions of some kind. That would just be kind of useless. Because we always play a role. At home, we have one role. At work, we have another role. Even here, we have one role. I have one role, which is up on the stage here. And it takes time to find your role, especially if it's a new situation. Then you need to have some guidance. So there I was, managing several Scrum teams, acting as a business owner, and I needed to clarify everyone's role. And I could handle this in several different ways as a leader. The question was, which way would be the best way? Should I perhaps just point with my entire hand, say, this is how it is, this is what the Scrum Master does, this is what the product owner do? Or should I perhaps do a more image or a picture of this is where we want to go, this is how we want it to be? Maybe I should build some consensus, asking everyone, what do you think? How would you like it to be? And this question begs the question, is there a particular leadership style that is best for Scrum or Agile? I mean, the Scrum Guide says that the Scrum Master should be a true leader, but it doesn't define what a true leader is. And maybe, if we look at, the values of Scrum, which is commitment, focus, openness, respect, courage, maybe that could tell us something. I was thinking about it, but I said, no, it's more about how we treat each other, and it's great values, but it doesn't say anything about leadership style. And I met a lot of, Scrum coaches or Scrum Masters, and especially, about 2 years ago, there was this big drive that, you should only have this coaching leadership style all the time. And ask powerful questions and so on. And the funny thing is, if you look for ads, there are not that many Scrum Master or Agile coaches, ads in papers anymore, because everyone seems to be laying them off. But still, 80% of every company runs, some Agile framework. You seldom see an ad for an Agile dictator. I've been looking very carefully for that. But maybe it's needed sometimes. Maybe we need an Agile dictator. Someone who can point with the entire hand. Because is it true, does Scrum or other Agile frameworks only work with a specific leadership type? So let me just make a very simple, or rather a silly example. Let's, pretend you are in the building, you are the leader, and, suddenly there is a fire in the building, and the team, they come running to you and say, "Oh, help, the building is on fire. What should we do? Where can we go?" Should you then begin to ask powerful questions, tilt your head and say, "How are you really feeling? What would be the best way to escape the building, you think?" Probably not, the best of ideas. So in a crisis, I think that you need some clear leadership. You need to be very clear about the direction we're going and how we should be doing it. So, let's explore some ways I could be handling this scenario. So, let me introduce to a few personalities or a few leadership styles I could take, as a leader. I could be a decisive dog, I could be charismatic Monty, I could be consensus Carla, relational Ray, ambitious Alex, or Coach Carter. There's a lot of text on this one, so I'll just let you read it through for a minute. I know myself how hard it is to multitask and listen and read at the same time. So, in this case, perhaps I should be decisive dog. Just point with my hand and tell the team, this is what a Scrum Master does, this is your accountabilities. Where I dictate, the ownership and accountabilities. The upside would be that would be a fast decision. It would be very quick, it would be done and over with, done, checked, everything. What would be the downside? Well, the downside is that it will be based upon the ideas of one person. It would be my ideas. And that's not very much delving into the collective intelligence of the team, really. Another issue is that you probably form a culture that whenever there is a problem, you just ask the leader. And then the leader answers the question. So it can be kind of stale, the entire approach. And there's also a risk that what if I say the wrong thing? Then no one will, challenge it, because, it will be, well, the boss decided it, so yeah, it's stupid, but let's do it. What if I became, the charismatic, authoritative, charismatic Monty, painting a rosy picture of this is where I want to go, this is what it should be like, this is a dream scenario. The problem was that the teams, they came to me and they did understand where we wanted to end up, but did not know how to get there. So probably this will not solve the issue either. But what if the fundamental problems are relational? Whispers relational Ray in my ear. What if it is because they don't stand each other, they can't work together? Then it doesn't matter how well you define the roles. Maybe we should have more after works instead. Maybe that's the solution. Now, everyone seemed to like Scrum, but they seemed confused about how we should work with it. So maybe the problem was that we were in the Scrum fantasy land. Maybe I should demand more from the Scrum Masters to force them to make sure that they give a clear picture to all the teams about what the accountabilities and responsibilities are. Maybe I should just relentlessly follow up every day, says ambitious Alex. Consensus Carla, she thinks I should just listen to the team and ask them what they think is the best solution here. But the thing is that, the teams, they came to me to give an answer. That meant that they didn't know what to do. They, having the approach of saying, don't come to me with problems, come to me with solutions, might not be the best way to fix this in this case, because they wanted some help. And also, if I ask them, they wanted a solution now. Sometimes if you ask people, it will take forever. At least in Sweden, we always want consensus, and it takes forever. It takes, years to get consensus, but nothing ever gets moving without consensus. Maybe I should hire a trainer. But on the other hand, everybody knew what Scrum was, and they had worked with it for many years, so probably that was not a good solution either. So, which approach should I take? So, take a minute or two, talk with your neighbor, say hi, and think about which approach would you take? All right, I hope you gave it some thought here. Now, wrong direction. Well, my experience tells me that the type of leadership that you need to have depends on the situation and the context and the culture, and also the personalities involved. So the type of leadership depends. And there are a number of factors, but I do believe that situation, personalities, and context and culture are kind of important. And, if you, for example, have a laid-back leader and you have a very competent and autonomous team that can take their own decision, that works very well. But if you have a newly formed team that don't know what to do and need directions, that approach might not be the best. Then you might need some clear leadership in the beginning. So depending on the situation, you need different approaches. What you see here is a Kubler-Ross change curve. It's basically, the phases that we typically go through in a change, and that could be, a change in the company. It could be a change in, at home. It could be a change when you're forming a new team, when you go from one method to another, and so on. And you can see we usually start, with some shock. Whoa, what's happening? And then we deny it. It will not happen. And then we get angry, or we get depressed because fuck, it's going to happen anyway, And then after a while we think about maybe we could experiment a little bit, maybe this is not as bad as we think. And then lastly, we do decide that this is okay, and we accept it. And accepting, a new way of working is also a significant change. And here we were, we had new teams and new way of working, and and maybe, we can connect these leadership styles to, depending upon where we are in this Kubler-Ross change, maybe we can have different leadership styles depending upon where we are. So in the shock denial, if you've been there, you know what's most important here is to share relevant information. Information needs to be precise, it needs to be fact, and any irrelevant information would just, you know, lead to rumors and gossip all over the organization all the time, creating havoc. And you probably need to say the same message over and over and over again in different, you know, medias and so on. But you need to be decisive, and you need to say, this is going to happen, like it or not. So maybe, you know, in this, you know, type, you should have, you know, either Alex, or you should have decisive dog, you know, just going in and saying, you know, just get over it, let's move. It will happen. And it could perhaps be nicer with charismatic Monty, because, you know, with he's probably a respected person, he has a vision and charisma, so people tend to follow him. Now, when you go to frustration, anger, it's not much you can do as a leader. You just have to stand firm, you know, and wait for everybody to, you know, calm down a little bit. It doesn't matter. So, you know, it's only important, again, to say, this will happen, you know, just accept it so we can move on. And again, you know, charismatic Monty might be good. It might also, you know, if there's a revolt, you know, or if, you know, if everybody is trying to do riots on the office or so on, you might need decisive dog to just stop it. And I'm not saying that consensus Carla might not work, but the thing is, you want this phase to be as short as possible. So if you open up the opportunity again with consensus Carla, do you think this was a good idea to do the restructuring again? You know, it could go on forever. Now, then you get depressed, but you realize, okay, this is going to happen no matter what I say. So that is a little bit, you know, when you need to heal, when you need to listen to people, when you need relations. So that's when you have relational Ray coming in, you know, to, you know, say, this will be okay, don't worry, we'll be fine. Now, as we begin to accept this, we might want to experiment. And that's where I might have Coach Carter, because then at that time it's about trying to figure out, well, my skills, how can they be used in a new situation? Can you please coach me to understand how I can best use my ability? So people can grow. Or you could have consensus Carla here, you know, we all discuss, okay, we accepted this, we've been depressed, but now let's experiment. What is the path forward? The thing is, at this stage, you should not press people. This must take some time. People should be allowed to take some time here to understand what it means for them. You know, and then finally in the acceptance phase, you know, that's where you have the momentum. We need to drive forward fast, and that's where you might need to have ambitious Alex to push people in the right direction to make sure that the changes stick. Maybe 15 or 16 years ago, I was in Cambodia, in the capital, Phnom Penh, and at that time they actually only had one paved road through the entire city, and the Americans had built it, and on this road, which had 2 lanes, cars were driving in both directions on both sides, and there were a lot of motorcycles as well, and there were no green lights or red lights or anything. And I was asking my friend, how are we going to cross this road? It just seemed impossible. And so he told me, you know, do you trust me? I said, sure, I trust you. So he said, you know, close your eyes and then just walk in a steady, slow pattern across the road. Do not look up, because then you will be afraid and then you will stop and the cars will hit you. You know, but if you move slowly in a steady pace, the cars and the motorcycles will see you and they will kind of evade you. And I survived because I'm here, so that was good, you know, but I was kind of the, you know, charismatic Monty approach of leadership style. I doubt anything else would have worked. So So of course, there are no hard rules about which leadership style to use in which situation. And I believe that, our personality influence which leadership style that comes most natural to us. If you are a goal-oriented person who likes to talk a lot and is not afraid of conflicts, decisive dog might be natural for you, or charismatic Monty for that matter. And each leadership style is, of course, as we could see, useful in different situations. So you need to decide which leadership style to use. But not all of them might come natural for you. And the choice matters. In a crisis situation, you might have to take a different leadership style than you would when everything is working perfectly. And I've actually seen this in reality. At a previous work, my manager, who I liked a lot, he got fired because, on the other side of the Atlantic, they were not happy with the performance, so they said, you're fired, you have to do something else. And then they wanted change, and they wanted change very quickly. So they took in a person who came to the office and a town hall meeting, and he gathered everyone, and he said that, I'm Sarah's torpedo. It's my way or the highway. I'm not kidding. That's what he said, and the country manager's name was not Sarah, but I'm protecting the innocent here. And he tried to get change through, but sometimes reality is more complex than it seems. And after 3 months, he had no result at all. And during this time, I actually got to learn to know him. And it turned out he was a nice guy. But he had been told, when you come into this role, you need to be decisive dog. You need to be tough. Because I could see that's been too much lax in the previous organization. So you need to be tough and go in and make changes. But this was not really natural for him, and he had done it so hard and so one-sided that it was very hard for him to change, because it would not feel, he had lost all trust, and then should he suddenly be relational Ray after having been very tough for 3 months? That did not work. So the situation was unsustainable. So he could not continue either. Of course. So you need to be a person who acts, in harmony with your natural, style, to be authentic. So again, which path or which style works best for Scrum? And I think we have focused too much on, I might be making myself very enemy with some Scrum Masters or Agile coaches here, but I think we focus too much on the democratic or coaching style. I don't think that's needed all the time. I don't think that's a golden bullet. I think it depends on the company and the situation in the company and where you are. And you can see that some companies are very successful despite having what I would call an agile dictator. Just look at Elon Musk, for example. I would say that's an agile dictator. I would not like to work under him, but you cannot say that he's not having success. So I believe, leadership is about, successful leadership, I should say, is about having the right person in the right place at the right time. And it might be in the beginning of a new, starting up something new, you might need one leadership style, and then when everything is working, you might have to change the leader to someone else who has a different kind of personality. But it all depends, again, because bringing in decisive dog to a well-functioning, creative, autonomous team to do micromanaging might be as harmful as bringing in consensus Carla to make a vote on which exit to take when the building is on fire. So I guess, when the Scrum Guide talks about true leadership, we need to think about all of this. I think we need to see what kind of leadership style should we take depending on the situation. I asked, a generative AI to draw up a picture of a true leader. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. I hope AI has become better after that. but this is what the true leader looks like. It's kind of confusing to me, at least. Anyway, so back to my story again. So the team members, they had different expectations about who owns what and who's responsible for what, and this led to some friction among the team members. So we did share some common ground. We're all new to the organization. Almost all of us had experience with Agile frameworks previously. None of us had worked with SAFe previously. Everybody had many years of experience from the industry, but none of us had worked together previously, and that's the crucial thing, because we had very different experiences of Scrum and how to work with it and understandings. For example, I can say I had a Scrum Master from King, game company that made Candy Crush, and then had another Scrum Master from Ericsson. Do you think they work in the same way? Of course they don't. It's a very different thing. So you come in with different expectations of what is the role of a Scrum Master. So we had some frictions. So we're all newcomers, so we needed clear guidelines on what to do. So we thought we needed some clarity in our roles. So the problem was not relational, because we liked each other and we could work well together. So actually away with relational array, I don't think that was a good idea. And of course I could paint a rosy picture of this is where we should be, like in Henrik Knieberg, you should cross a river, but I don't tell you how to do it, you figure it out yourself. But the teams had tried to figure it out and I didn't know how to do it. So I don't think that was the right approach either. And they all had, Agile experience many years. So having a coach, I don't think that was a good idea either, because we had that knowledge. So what the teams needed to do was to determine their own, expectations of each other in their roles, to understand what do I understand, what do I expect from you or you, how should we work together? And as a manager, it's quite nice because, well, that's Scrum Master's accountability. It's not me as a manager who should create efficient teams. So you go ahead and fix it. But I think as a leader, you might have to do, a little bit more about it. So what I did, myself is I said, all right, let's have ambitious Alex onto this. So I told, the Scrum Masters, what you need to do is you need to have some workshops on, the expectations on each other in the team. Go figure out, what you need to do, and then we follow up on this to see if we get any progress and see if the team members are more happy. Then the Scrum Masters, because they are leaders as well, they took on a little bit more of a different approach. So they actually, made more of a democratic or consensus Carla approach to discuss with the teams in the workshops instead. So this is a long list of text. You don't need to read it, but basically it is, the outcome of these workshops. And these workshops, we ask the team members, so, write down the expectations of the different roles. And I would not like to be the product manager. I just show this because this is a list of all expectations of the product manager. That's just crazy. And it's the same, with a system architect. There was so many expectations on the system architect. And of course, these values don't exactly match what's in the Scrum Guide. I really don't care, because it's most important for the teams themselves to figure out how to work together. And we also, so ambitious Alex, in order to have psychological safety, it was very popular 2 or 3 years ago. We decided to, take in a person from another office, to talk about psychological safety and what is important for us in our group as we are new. So we came up with a number of values here as well. When time passed and, more or less, we worked on, we forgot about the values and the role descriptions and so on, or at least I did. Then, a year later or so, there was a few members that said, we want to form a new team. So let's just go back in the beginning, because when I came to the company, there were actually 3 teams already in place. There was one consultant team, there was one team in Stockholm who had all the domain knowledge, and there was one team of newly hired people. And I could see that was a risk, because then you had all the domain knowledge in one team, all the technical knowledge in another team, so the knowledge of the teams was unevenly spread. So at that point I just said, as a new manager, I said, this doesn't work, we need to split the teams. So, split the teams so we have the right competencies in order to perform our work in all of the teams. And that was not a democratic decision, it was just a decision that I took. And that kind of worked because everyone was new and, people had not gotten to know each other. But now, a year later, the team from Stockholm, they said, it's kind of boring for us to, sit distributed in different teams. We want to have one team physically located in Stockholm. So this time, and we transferred all the domain knowledge, so I said, all right, let's see what other teams think. So this time I actually let Consensus Carla, take over. So the teams themselves had to discuss this. And strangely enough, this became a big discussion, because some teams were completely opposite to this idea, said, no, you cannot become a team again. And other teams thought, well, that's okay, you can do this. And it took a long time to get this through, but eventually, it worked well. 5 minutes, okay. And now, we decided to do this and to split it into 5 teams anyway. And there were other factors as well. There were some people retiring, someone on paternity leave, maternity leave, and so on. So we still had to do some, and we had hired lots of new people. So we needed to do some change anyway. So actually, I sat down with the Scrum Master discussing a little bit, how can we do this? Who should fit in this team and that team? And the funny thing is that now when we discuss this, no one mentioned role descriptions anymore. That was not even on the agenda. What we talked about was about personality traits, competencies, and skills. So discussions could be something like, well, Joe, the Scrum Master in team 1, he has to be with these people because he has taken a lot of, ownership for continuous integration, and Bia in team 2, she has focused a lot on, the relational skills between the teams, and she's needed in that team in order for that team to harmonize. And so on. So I just realized that all the discussions at this time were actually about accountabilities and responsibilities, and not about role descriptions anymore. So now we kind of had gotten into what the Scrum Guide was talking about, that teams should have accountabilities for certain areas and be able to do something. And nobody cared anymore about the role description. I even think that, having a role description would have, kind of box people into a corner, and people would not have liked that at all. So basically we had, moved past the stage of uncertainty, and we were trying to figure out, the strengths and weaknesses and the right competences into the right teams. So I think, my experience is that when teams are new, you need to have a little bit of clear guidance, and people do want to know, where are we going, which direction, please tell us, because we're uncertain and we don't know really how to work with each other. And that helps us to, minimize the storming period as well. So knowing one's role is very good when things are new and it's uncertain. But as we start to perform, I believe that fixed roles can be negative, can negatively affect the teams. And for self-managing teams, I think it's more useful to have accountabilities and responsibility than to have written job descriptions. And I believe, that as team members, become comfortable and trust each other, we learn about each other's strengths and weaknesses and how to work together, and that's when we get a really effective team. And that has nothing to do with a job description. And as leaders, I think, the leadership side and what we should do is to help the team to continuously improve depending upon where the team is, in which phase they are. You need to take a little bit different approach with the teams as well, And leaders, we should, more make sure that the teams can work together, remove, obstacles, and making sure you have as little dependencies and so on. And sometimes you might need an agile dictator, I think. You might need that. Because there is no one size fits all. It all depends upon the people that you work with. And I think, that Marilyn Monroe said that quite well. Wanting to be someone else is a waste of the person that you are. And that concludes my talk. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we do have one question from the audience, which is, do organizations actually need a dedicated Scrum Master?
Well, I've worked with organizations without Scrum Masters. I work with teams, which have worked very well without a Scrum Master. But I do believe someone in a team, because I think as humans, we need someone who becomes a leader. If we don't have a leader, there is an informal leader at all times. And it doesn't necessarily have to have the name of Scrum Masters. I think these issues are eternal. I promise you, in 5 years, we will not be working with Scrum anymore, because there will be something new coming up, but the issues and the problems in team dynamics will be more or less the same anyway.
Okay, thank you. And then we have how should a leader in a Scrum framework measure and evaluate the success of their team and their own leadership effectiveness?
Whew, that's a big question. So many ways to do it. I mean, of course, customer happiness is one thing, but also developer happiness, of course, if you want metrics, I'm still fond of, measuring cycle times, to see how efficient are we, and also can the team work without any dependencies or having to start working, start working, can they handle their own problems and issues? Because I think that's the most fun about being a team, if you can handle all the issues yourself as a team without any dependencies.